Hello. Welcome to Access Rhode Island. I'm Adam Schmuter. Tonight, as part of our Education Reform program, we have with us a very special guest. Joining us now is Dr. Catherine Sharkey, who is an educator at Brown University, has been conducting Sleep for Science studies for over 25 years, and is also a key leader in the East Greenwich Start School Later campaign. Thank you very much, Dr. Sharkey, for coming in to join us, and we look forward to engaging these vibrant topics.
Great, I'm glad to be here.
So, why did East Greenwich decide to get involved and take these challenges in the community? Did they just read about it, or did they just see that students got no sleep? And how did you get involved?
So I wasn't there for the very beginning of when the school start time program started in East Greenwich, but I heard about it very quickly via email because all the moms in the community kind of keep in touch. And when they found out that I was a sleep medicine physician and a sleep researcher, they quickly drew me into their group. So the two main leaders of the group are Catherine Rogers, who's a former middle school teacher, and Rebecca Bliss, who's a former dean of a college in Minnesota. And I believe that Dr. Bliss is the person who had heard about it because a lot of the work done in this area originally started in Minnesota, and a lot of the pilot studies on changing school start times originated in Minnesota. And so she's been very involved in education in our town and was looking for ways that East Greenwich could make positive changes that would actually impact the desired outcomes that I think all communities want their children to benefit from, like better grades and better health and better rankings in, ratings of schools. And so she started this groundswell of people who were eager to move the high school and middle school start times later in East Greenwich.
So this is a national program. This is, you said, based in Minnesota. Is there any history behind this organization?
Well, I think that there have been grassroots pockets. There have been people who've advocated in their communities. It's a loose organization, I would say. The StartSchoolLater.org group kind of provides background information for the different communities that want to implement these changes in their high schools and their middle schools. Of course, each town, it's going to be individualized because it's going to have its own pattern. That they're going to have to, family issues and school issues and extracurriculars and the kinds of things that they're going to have to deal with bus schedules in different communities. So although that organization is sort of a blanket for disseminating information and providing resources to parents and communities who want to make the change, it's not as though people in East Greenwich are sort of following a set
so it's really
prescription or something.
It really is a grassroots.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. This is people talking outside of a school committee meeting about what's best for our kids and what the educational data show. And we all feel, those of us who are involved, that this is a real opportunity to use what we know about science and biology to make a difference in our kids' education without too much investment from the community in terms of financial differences.
I see. So your research shows that there is substantial evidence that provides, health benefits for, giving students enough sleep that, affects their performance in schools.
There's a large body of research that, some of which I've been involved in, that shows us what the effects of sleep deprivation and not obtaining enough sleep are, both on children and teens and in adults. We know that children who don't get enough hours of sleep perform worse in school, which is obviously the most relevant issue for this particular topic, but they also have other poor outcomes. They're more likely to use substances. They're more likely to have impulsive behaviors, such as trying drugs that maybe they wouldn't try if they weren't sleep deprived. One of the key features of our brains that needs rest is something called the frontal lobe, which is in the front of our head. And that's kind of our executive functioning part of our brain that helps us make good decisions. And when we're sleep deprived, that part of the brain does not work as well. And in teenagers, especially, that part of the brain is still developing and making connections with other parts of the brain. So you take a teen brain that's already only developing this kind of cognitive skill of making good decisions, and then you sleep deprive it, you're going to come up with worse outcomes. Other issues are increased risk of mood disorders like depression and anxiety. There's increased rates of suicide in children who have sleep deprivation, and also more car accidents and safety issues. So when you look at the body of evidence together, that's been really built over decades by many pediatric sleep researchers, including some at Brown University, particularly Mary Carskadden at Brown, we can see that these students can be vulnerable if they don't get enough sleep.
Yeah, that's not unheard of, that students don't get enough sleep, and it's not always has to do with the excitement levels in the classroom. There must be something to it, because a lot of times students with their heavy course loads have to stay up late at night, and what does the biology say? Does the biology say that the students are up late because they have a lot of homework, or are they wired differently?
So we think that developmental changes occur in sleep habits as children pass from being a sort of preteen in through the teen years and into adulthood. We think that the biological clock shifts, so they become more like night owls. The other thing is, once they experience that biological change, there's also behaviors that sort of keep them set at a later time point. So when we get light at night, for example, using a computer or a handheld device or the television, that light tends to push our body clocks later. So if you take a kid whose biology is already pushing them on the late side, and then you add light at night to stay up to do their challenging homework or be in a sport or be in another activity with friends, that's all sort of working against the child being able to, or the adolescent being able to get up at an early school start time. And then, so what happens is, of course, families for the most part, at least in the town I live in, make the kids get up, and what results is they have a real a development over time of a lot of sleep deprivation. So we've many of us have sort of spoken about this issue at the school committee meetings in our town, and a father brought up a really interesting example a couple of weeks ago about a young lady who he drives to jazz band every morning at 6:30 in the morning, and she estimates that when she finally gets her homework done, it's about midnight. So if she goes to bed at midnight and jazz band starts at 6:30, that's a 6.5 hour sleep opportunity. Now I'm sure this lovely young lady is going to take a shower and get ready for school. So now we're talking about, maybe a 5.5 to 6 hour sleep opportunity, which is grossly inadequate for the brain of a 17 or 18-year-old. It's not adequate for an adult, for that matter.
It's naysay to say that, it's preferable to get 8 to 10 hours of sleep. And if the schools are pushing students to get 6 hours of sleep, it's no surprise that, they're sometimes not fully awake in the classroom. You mentioned that, car accidents happen as a result of, of prolonged wakefulness. I have here this graphic that shows that there's an impairment similar to that produced by alcohol. Could you please tell us any more about that?
Sure. So this is a really interesting study. I don't know, can we show the graphic?
Sure.
That
this
was done a few years ago, which compares the use of alcohol with sleep deprivation, basically. So in this study, they kept young adults, so these weren't even teenagers, they were young adults, awake in the laboratory and they would rate their sleepiness and measure some of their performance on a handheld device that is just simply a reaction time test. But the reaction time test has been tested in many sleep deprivation paradigms, and the precise measure that they measure on the test is what we call a lapse, which means that the person failed to respond at all. And we think that those lapses correlate pretty highly with things like fall asleep car accidents. So it only takes a second for you to miss something, and then you've driven off the road. And so this lapse measure is a sort of widely respected measure. And so that's what they did in this study, is they measured lapses with sleep deprivation every hour, and in one group. And in the other group, they just gave them drinks every hour, alcohol drinks. And can I pick up the?
Sure.
So what you see here in the left panel is blood alcohol concentration on this x-axis, and so it's going up over time. And here is the worsening performance. So the performance, so higher is better performance. And what you can see is, not unexpectedly, as blood alcohol concentration goes up, performance goes down. Now on the right panel is the hours of sleep deprivation, and you can see that along here, so people are pretty well maintaining and not having a lot of these lapses until they're awake for about 16 hours. And then they start to drift down throughout the night until, after about 20 hours, they're equal to a blood alcohol level that is considered illegal in every state in the nation to drive under. So when we sleep deprive our kids, they can have a brain that's functioning about like if they were drinking alcohol.
Well, all these kids are sometimes they're texting on their phones, or they unfortunately are drinking, but most people don't even realize the fact that if they're not getting enough sleep at night, then it's going to have a very similar effects, and that's distracted driving, and it's tragic that happens. You mentioned that there is academic improvements. Do you know any substantive relative gains that, relating to grade point average or standardized tests or classroom attendance, tardiness? What have you found in your research that shows or examples of these, various
good outcomes?
Good outcomes.
So there was a recent study that was published by Kyla Wallstrom and her colleagues, including some schools in Minnesota and Colorado, where they have implemented school start times. And the benefits that they showed ranged from, like you said, increases in GPA. They had much less tardiness. So before the school start times were implemented, they had 15% of kids would miss school at least once a week because they were oversleeping and not getting to school on time, and 10% each would fall asleep either in a morning class or an afternoon class. So these are kids that are clearly not getting what they need from school if they're falling asleep. And they found that these outcomes, like tardiness, like falling asleep in class, like a poor GPA went down. In one community, accident rates went down 6% just over the short time span they measured in kids ages 16 to 18. So they did this amazing retrospective study where they found all the traffic accidents attributed to 16 to 18-year-old kids in this town, and were able to show that the rate of those accidents went down. So there are a lot of benefits and one of the ways that we know these kids are experiencing so much sleep debt is they sleep in on weekends, and so one of the other things that can happen when they increase school start times is their biological clocks can get back on track. So there's a better sense of well-being, a better health.
They're trying to make up for lost time, but
it sort of rights a wrong, if you will. When they're going to bed at midnight and getting up at 6, their body clock isn't sleeping at the right circadian time or the right biological time. And when they were able to lengthen the night by delaying the school start times, the kids were getting more sleep and they were no longer sort of out of phase with their own biology.
Yeah, Rhode Island is right now in the middle of, some great controversy regarding standardized tests, from the kneecap to the Common Core. And, Rhode Island, unfortunately, doesn't have as high test scores as, we like in Rhode Island to relate ourselves to our neighbors. We're such a close community. We relate to our towns, but we also relate to other states like Massachusetts and Connecticut to see how they're doing. And like I said, our scores are not up to par with that. And even there was just this latest development where the State House had to forego not allowing students to graduate just a few weeks before they're supposed to graduate because of these, they didn't perform to the standard on these tests.
This has a proven track record. We know this goes along with the biology, and when you implement it, in the communities that implement it, they across the board show increases in these meaningful outcomes, and so it sort of is why wouldn't we do this for our kids if we understand that this is going to make it better? And there are a lot of answers to that question too, which I'm sure you might want to, we probably will discuss.
Right. So what does your organization, Start School Later in East Greenwich, the ideal time, or at least proposing to start the school day?
So when you ask sleep researchers and you ask people who've done this in the past what the ideal time is, usually the number that comes up is around 8:30, and the school shouldn't really start before 8:30. If you ask teenagers, 75% of them say they'd like it past 8:30, and something like 30% of them say that they'd like it 9 a.m. or later. So that might not be feasible for the teens to sleep in till 8 or 9, but certainly 8:30 is a number that gets kicked around a lot, and the word on the street is the American Academy of Pediatrics is going to come out with a formal statement saying in the coming months saying that is their recommendation as well. So this is the group that brought us car seats and put your baby to bed back on their back, not on their tummy, and so now the American Academy of Pediatrics is getting into into this as well, because the data are so irrefutable that it's the right thing to do, sort of from a biological perspective and a safety and health perspective.
So the science is there, both academically, health benefits. Now it's just a matter of practicality, and it's going to take a lot of effort to make this a great initiative. Because people are reluctant to change, and you have various organizations that have their own stake involved as well. So, what obstacles has your organizations faced, and what is a reasonable answer to give them, such as bus transportation? In East Greenwich, how does the bus system work, and does it impact other communities as well?
So that's a great question, and there are obviously a lot of stakeholders. It's not just the students who we'd like to keep at the center and have them be our most important stakeholders, but it's our great teachers. We have great teachers in East Greenwich, and we certainly want to retain all that educational talent. It's the parents and the families. It's the bus company. It's the taxpayers, and it's the interscholastic sports leagues and drama clubs and music, coalitions that all work together across schools that have the potential to be affected. So in schools districts where they have done this successfully, they have really taken the time to approach all of those stakeholders and get their input, get their buy-in, and do a lot of education around sleep. We were talking a few minutes ago about all the things that are relevant to sleep health and, better mood and, less danger and less impulsivity and better grades and all these things. And it's one thing for us to talk and know those things, but I think a lot of families don't always know, well, gee, how much sleep should my 16-year-old be getting? By the time you have a 16-year-old, you're not checking the, Dr. Spock book to see, well, how much, it's not like when you have an infant, you're like, how much should my baby sleep? A 16-year-old, nobody's keeping track of that. And maybe not enforcing it. And for instance, in most of these studies, about 5 or 6% of kids had a set bedtime from their parents by the time they were in the high school years. So part of it's going to be educating just about sleep and sleep health. I think that's really important. And that's not just the kids, but it's the parents, and it's not allowing us to move school start times just so that other things can even start earlier. I'm sure there are people who hear, "Ooh, school's not going to start till 8:30," and they think, "Great, we can have track practice at 6:30 now." That there are ways that people will want to work around.
So it takes a community discussion.
Well, sure, and it takes education about why it's important too. If the kids all just decide school's not going to start till 8:30, so I'm going to stay up later, then that defeats the purpose too. Does that make sense? So it's partly educating the kids about, we're not doing this so that you can stay up till 1 or 2. We're staying at.
Is it practical though for parents that not only might work 9 to 5 jobs, but they have to wake up early, sometimes 6:30 themselves? To travel and make sure that breakfast is given, and so if school starts at 8:30, is there a plan in action, or what have other schools done? Do they have? Well, they have the busing transportation. They might be able to give food at breakfast at the schools, but for parents that don't want to give their child, as much alone time, they might not want to send them off and then have to go off to work. They want to be able to go smoothly from when they wake up, get their kid to school, get to work. So have you seen that question come up?
So, right, you asked before about when schools start now and what the busing is like now in East Greenwich. And right now there's a 3-tiered bus system. They're trying to move that to a 2, which means some kids are starting as early as 7:20, other kids are starting as late as 9:18 or 9:20, something like that. So there's a wide range because they go to all different schools. There's software that is incredible that can make every permutation of bus schedule that you ask it to, knows how many stops and how many kids and how old they are and so forth. So there certainly can be more work done on how the bus scheduling would work to work this out. It's not going to go like that, but I guess I should say the technology is in place to sort of go through the various scenarios and figure out workable solutions to this. So that's the busing. Insofar as you said, what about parents who have to watch kids? Who will they watch and so forth? These are all issues that people will have to figure out and that you have to keep track of. And I'll give you an example that people do work them out. In East Greenwich, we have half-day kindergarten, not full-day kindergarten, which is another show. But
we'd love to have you on again.
No, I'm not the right person to talk about that, but I'll tell you what happened is my little neighborhood that I live in had afternoon kindergarten for, 10 years or something. And I was like, so my little guy's going to go to kindergarten. And of course, the week before school, I get the letter, congratulations, your son's in morning kindergarten. So all the aftercare plans, I'm a working mom, that I had made and clung to all summer, the week before school, had to flip them and find, an alternative.
Right, that comes up all the time.
So
full-time
and you know what?
Kindergarten
Kid went to school the first day and every day after that. So families work it out. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and certainly I would have appreciated more notice than a week for that situation that I just gave you. But there are ways that people can work to figure things out. And just an aside about that, we always talk about, well, when's band practice going to be, or how about field hockey, or those kinds of things. But the kids who also have the chance to benefit from this are the kids who are doing worst in school, who may not even be able to muster being in a sport or doing any activities because it's all they can do to drag themselves back and forth to school every day. So while parents, I think, want to focus on the high-achieving students in the school and think, oh, how's this going to impact, varsity sports or the drama club or the many wonderful activities they have at our high school. I also think we need to keep sort of an ear out for the kids who are barely getting by and maybe already struggling with depression or anxiety or other, substance issues, impulsivity problems, and focus on whether this might benefit the more vulnerable kids in our community.
Well, it certainly is great that we have such leaders in Rhode Island, and we wish you the most success and best of luck in this campaign. We want to hear back from you and keep up with these developments. It's very exciting. Certainly isn't a topic that would put me to sleep. So thank you very much, Dr. Sharkey, for coming in today. And thank you to our viewers. This is Access Rhode Island, and have a great night.